What's up, guys? I'm BTC. Turns out some of those April Fool's Day changes are actually going to get into the game. Earlier today, we got a new experimental mode with some of those changes that are not exact, but I expect that these changes that we just got today will get put over to the live version of the game in about a week or so. I'll go over all of those changes in just a second. Real quick, want to let you guys know that I have playable versions of several of the hero concepts that I have made. This was done using the workshop, and I'm going to be able to play these characters. Quan and Isaac are the two that were created. I'm going to play them during some live streams, and you guys will get to try them out as well, and we'll see how they work in the actual game itself. And then I'll also make some follow-up videos where I talk about how I liked using the characters and any other changes that I would make now that I have tested them. Going to the changes for today's patch, first up is Baptiste. They reduced the AoE healing on his main healing ability from 60 down to 50. However, they also made it so that if you land a direct impact with that heal, it will do an extra 20. So your main target will get 70 healing, and all of the ones in the area get 50 healing. I think this is really good. It forces the player to be a little more accurate in order to be more effective with the character. Overall, this is a pretty good change. I like this. The other change that they made to Baptiste is that his immortality field will now only stop you at 10% instead of 20%. Previously, you could throw this out and you would still have a pretty decent chunk of health, even when the ability is out there and you're taking lots of damage from an ultimate or whatever. So you didn't have to worry too much, but now it's down to 10%, and it's a lot more of a dangerous situation where you now have to either be healed up quickly while you're in the immortality field, or you need to escape and go off to the side or something. You can't just sit there in the open with the immortality field, because as soon as it goes away, then you're going to be in a lot of danger with only 10% health. This change does make the ability a little less frustrating to deal with, but I don't think it really solves the issue, and that would be Immortality Field is a defensive ultimate that's pretending to be a normal ability, and as long as you have it as a normal ability, it's going to just cause problems. So I think the better thing to do would be to swap Immortality Field and the Amp Matrix. Obviously, you're going to have to change some of the stats around and stuff like that. You can't just leave them as is, but I think making Immortality Field into a proper defensive ultimate, and then Amp Matrix as something that you can use to regularly help buff your own healing and your teammates' damage and stuff would just be a better thing to do. Next up is Diva. She got a change that's quite similar to what she had during the April Fool's event. Her normal ultimate remains the same, but now the Call Mech is better. They increased the damage from 50 up to 250, which is enough to take out most of the enemies in the game. I think during the April Fool's event, it was like 500 or 550 or 600 damage or something. It was just way too much. And I think that 250 is a pretty good amount. It makes it more of a threat to any enemies that might be in the area, so they can't just kind of like try to wall off the Diva and block her into a corner and that sort of stuff. I think this is a good change. It's very simple, but it's a nice little change and a buff for the character. Next up is Echo. They nerfed her duplicate. Very simply, they made it so that it will not heal her all the way to full whenever she fully finishes out her ultimate. As you can see, I start with about 30-something health there, and then when the ultimate runs out, it is going to give me 100 health instead of bringing me all the way back up to full. So the way this works is when your ultimate ends, it will either return you to whatever you had before, or up to 100, whichever is the higher number. So basically, it was just too much, because you would take a lot of damage, you would use your ultimate, get full health, then when that got destroyed, you would get full health again. So they just reduced it, so now you just get 100 maximum up to fill, rather than putting you all the way to the full. Next up is Moira. The Biotic Orb cooldown was reduced from 10 seconds to 8 seconds, and this is going to be for both the damage and the healing orb. I do not think that this is really a good idea, because Moira is already quite effective in the lower bracket, and this change is not really gonna do enough in the upper bracket. And another issue with Moira just in general is that you don't have to do all that much to be really effective with the character. and now you're just going to be able to spam out the biotic orbs even more than before. So I just think there are other changes that you could make that are going to be better to try to balance this character for both the upper and the lower bracket. And also, I don't think that she should have an ability that only does damage. The damage orb, she's the only support character in the game that has a pure damage ability, and it obviously causes problems. There are other ways and better ways to balance this character. Arisa's getting a buff to her halt ability. The cooldown was reduced from 8 seconds down to 6 seconds, which is kind of weird because Blizzard has been trying to reduce the CC abilities, and now they're making it so that you can use this every 6 seconds. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's going to be a nice buff for the character, but I think it's going to be pretty annoying to have an AoE kind of grab ability every 6 seconds. I don't know. Next up is Reinhardt, who's getting a nerf to his total health. It's going from 550 down to 500. They're effectively removing 50 of his armor. So now he's going to have 300 normal health and then 200 armor. I'm really not surprised. Reinhardt is the single most used character in the entire game for almost every single rank except Bronze, where I think he's number 2. He's constantly getting played right now, so I'm not really surprised that he is getting a nerf. Next is Roadhog, who's getting a damage buff for both his primary and secondary attack. It's going to be per projectile. They're increasing it from 6 up to 6.6. You can see how many projectiles go out for each of your attacks, and how much you get extra for these is going to be depending on how many of the projectiles hit the enemy, how many of them are normal hits, how many of them are critical, and how far away you are, because there is going to be some fall-off damage and stuff, and also you're just going to miss because they spread out. But I think on average, you're going to be looking at somewhere between 5 and 15 extra damage per attack. And again, depends on where they hit and how many and all that sort of stuff. But somewhere between 5 and 15 on average is probably going to be what it's going to be. And this is certainly going to help with his damage. Obviously, this also includes the secondary attack as well. But I think this is going to help a little bit more in some of those cases where you land the hook, you pull them in, and you go to hit them, and they survive with just a tiniest sliver of extra health. That probably isn't going to happen that much anymore. Now, if you have good aim, I mean, you really don't need to aim all that well with this when you hook them in, but you're going to be more likely to get those combos now with this. Next up is Sombra. She's getting a couple of changes that are, again, similar to what she had for the April Fool's event. Her fade time when entering or exiting stealth is reduced from 0.75 down to 0.45, which means that you're going to be able to escape a little bit faster, and you can also engage a little bit faster. Once you drop that stealth, you can attack, you can use your abilities, you can use your ultimate, whatever. You're going to be able to get on the enemy a little bit faster than you could before, and also they increase the movement speed in stealth. Instead of 50%, it's now an extra 60%, so you will move a little bit more. Right now, Sombra is the least played character in the game, and in some ranks, she is even below Bastion, which is really bad. I mentioned this in another video, but yeah, she's not very useful right now. She's more of a specialty character. I think that there are going to be situations where this change is going to be a nice one. It's going to be pretty significant. There are going to be certain matchups and certain team comps more towards the upper bracket and maybe in the pro scene this is going to apply. But there are going to be cases when she is going to be, you know, that much more worthwhile to use. But I still think in most situations, you're probably going to end up wanting to go with a different DPS. That is going to be all the changes for this patch. Again, I expect most of these, if not all of them, to get moved into the full regular version of the game in about a week or so. What do you guys think about these changes? Let me know down below. A big thanks to all the Paragons and other channel members for all your support. If you'd like to become one and grab some cool rewards, click the join button down below. Also, if you enjoyed the video, drop a like before you leave. And remember, always blame the controller because it's never your fault.